Good morning, friends. I am Dr. Rahul Pandit. I am the Director of ICU for Fortis Hospitals and SL Raja Hospital, Mumbai. And today we are going to talk about some of the myths and facts about the COVID-19 vaccine. And I'm going to keep it a little interactive. Uh, I'm going to have essentially uh, a mixture of Hindi and English. And if you have any questions, we'll be happy to take up on the chat box coming up to us. Now, essentially, this last year, 2020, has been one of the worst years for mankind. We've never gone through in the recent times such a problem in terms of the world facing at multiple levels. Not only was the health the main factor which was affected, but the economy came tumbling down as well. People were essentially not able to mix with the general population, so they were left alone to fend for themselves. A lot of governments could not cope up with this whole issue, and essentially the mankind came up to a standstill as far as the world progress was going on. Quite rightly so, several of us went through a lot of difficulties, and I'm counting myself in them. The reason being a doctor, we had to face the unknown, actually try and put up our chin, go and face the problems which are coming up, and understand that where are we heading to. However, with all the efforts put in at multiple levels by multiple people across the world, it did make a difference. And the difference was that people actually started understanding the unknown disease. We started understanding the way it was spreading. We started understanding the pros and cons of social distancing, masking, sanitization, and we came up with a solution in terms of many treatment protocols being put up and being talked about. However, as we move forward, the whole eyes were fixed upon the vaccine, because vaccine seems to be the single most convincing source of eradicating a disease. I'm going to switch to Hindi a little bit now. उसका कारण ये है कि वैक्सीन की तरफ हम लोग इतनी आतुरता से क्यों राह देख रहे थे। इसका कारण ये है कि हमारा जो इतिहास है, इस इतिहास में हमने काफ़ी सारी डिसीज़ेस को, काफ़ी सारे रोगों को ऐसे कम होते हुए देखा है जिनमें कि वैक्सीन की मुहिम जो है वो अच्छे से चलाई है। और इस कारण जो है हमको वैक्सीन के ऊपर बहुत उम्मीदें लगी, और सही मायने में कम से कम 10 से 12 डिफरेंट रिसर्चर्स अक्रॉस द वर्ल्ड उन्होंने वैक्सीन के बारे में संशोधन करना शुरू कर दिया। और ये संशोधन करते करते हम इस मकाम पे आ पहुँचे कि करीब करीब 9-10 महीने में ही हमारी जो वैक्सीन है वो तैयार हो। और बहुत गर्व के साथ कहना चाहता हूँ कि आज दुनिया में जितनी भी वैक्सीन बन रही है, आधे से ज़्यादा वैक्सीन का कुछ ना कुछ हमारे देश से ताल्लुक़ है, हिंदुस्तान से ताल्लुक़ है, भारत से ताल्लुक़ है। या तो हम उसके रिसर्च में लगे हुए हैं, या तो हम उसकी प्रोडक्शन कर रहे हैं, या तो प्राइमरली जो इंडिजिनियसली इंडियन मेड वैक्सीन है उस वैक्सीन के बारे में हम लोग जो है बहुत गर्व से कह सकते हैं कि पूरी तरह भारत में बना हुआ है। अब जब वैक्सीन आ गया, जब वैक्सीन लॉन्च हो गया, तो पहले जो वैक्सीन था वो यूरोप में लॉन्च हुआ, जो mRNA वैक्सीन था, जिसका की प्रोडक्शन फाइजर कंपनी और मॉडर्ना कर रहे थे, तो यूएस में और यूके में लॉन्च हुआ। ये दो देश है वो एक सेकेंड वेव या थर्ड वेव की तरह जा रहे हैं, और दे आर सॉर्ट ऑफ फेसिंग अ लॉट ऑफ प्रॉब्लम्स इन देयर control of the pandemic. And obviously the vaccine was required for them. Vaccine was very, very important for them. So they went through the process of actually going through the FDA approval for the mRNA vaccines. And then the Indian vaccine productions, the Oxford, AstraZeneca, Bharat Biotech, Serum Institute India, Covishield, and the Bharat Biotech, which is the indigenously made Indian vaccine, were put up for approvals as well. So yes, what are these different vaccines about? I'm just going to talk a little bit about these different vaccines and how they work, and then I'm going to talk about how is the vaccine production done, and why we should not worry about the safety of the vaccine. These are the few things which I would like to sort of talk about in the next 5-10 minutes or so. So currently, there are few different types of vaccine platforms. What does a vaccine platform mean? Vaccine platform means that what is the concept on which this vaccine is based on. What does a vaccine do essentially? Whichever vaccine platform you choose, the final result of that platform is that when that vaccine is injected in the person, it is supposed to produce antibodies against that particular disease. That's the primary goal of the vaccine. And for this, different types of vaccines have been utilized up until now. We've had vaccines which were live attenuated. Live attenuated means you take up a live virus, you decrease its potency by so much that it only is able to capable of producing a mild disease in your body. That's what is a live attenuated virus. It can be given through oral drops, nasal spray or injections, and the live attenuated virus will actually produce you that disease. So if I was to use a COVID-19 live attenuated virus, then it would actually mean that I have to cut down the efficacy of that virus to such a point that it becomes 1/10 of its potency, and it produces a mild COVID-19 disease in me. And then I will have some antibodies. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at virus would be that I take up a dead virus and prepare a vaccine, and by injecting the dead virus, the protein which is there of the dead virus will actually produce antibody which would be enough. The third would be that I actually have some form of a vector. Vector means, I'll give you a definition of a vector. Vector means that essentially you are using some form of a carrier to transport the required vaccine to produce, the required germs to produce the antibodies which are required. So the vector-based vaccine is the classic example is the Covishield, which is adenovirus, chimpanzee adenovirus, and that adenovirus has been made as a non-replicating, that does not actually go and replicate in your body, and it has got a spike protein on top of that, which is of the COVID-19. So that spike protein is the one which is responsible for producing the antibody against it. Then you could have something which is called as a new platform, which is your mRNA platform, which is a messenger RNA. M stands for the messenger RNA. Now, what does the messenger RNA do? Messenger RNA essentially goes and produces or mimics a disease in the body, which then helps to produce the antibodies. So it is actually just trying to give you signals to your mRNA or DNA to tell that, look, there is some problem. I feel that we have been attacked by the COVID-19 virus. Let's just produce the antibody against them. That's called the mRNA vaccine. Now, this is about the vaccines, the different types of vaccines which are available, the platforms which are available, the different vaccines which are available, and then what are the antibodies which are looking at. In a short, I'm just going to tell you that. So in India, we have got approval for two vaccines, the Covaxin, which is a completely indigenously made by Bharat Biotech, and Covishield. And there is some controversy regarding both, and I'll come to that. Then the mRNA platform are the two, the Pfizer one and the Moderna one. Then we have the Sputnik vaccine, and then we have a Chinese vaccine which is there. Plus there is a Cadila vaccine which has been given third phase 3 permission, and then there is a Johnson & Johnson vaccine which has been basically given a phase 2 and phase 3 trial permission right now, which is going to be the first vaccine which will be a single dose vaccine, as opposed to rest of the vaccines which are actually a 2-dose vaccine. That is, you take a primary dose and then you go and take up a booster dose after that. So what are these antibodies? Well, generally when people have got COVID-19, they go across and they get their antibodies tested, and then they come back to me and tell me that my antibody level is 100 or my antibody level is so and so. Now, these are the total antibodies which are measured. You don't need to have a total antibody. What you need to know is you need to have the neutralizing antibody. And neutralizing antibodies are the IgG antibodies, which are produced as a response to an infection. And these IgG antibodies, of that total IgG antibodies, around 70 to 80% should be neutralizing antibodies. Then you can say that you've actually got protection from a particular disease. If your IgG antibody levels are not adequate, and if out of that 70 or 80% are not neutralizing, then my friend, even if your total antibody level is 100, you are not protected because your IgG antibody, the neutralizing antibody levels are low. That's something which people need to understand what it is. The second thing which you need to understand is that these vaccines are actually meant to produce the neutralizing antibody. Hence, when people say that I have had COVID 4 months ago, 5 months ago, I still have antibodies, why should I take a vaccine? The reason you should take a vaccine is that the antibodies which will be produced by the COVID-19 vaccine are going to be rich of neutralizing antibodies, and those are the antibodies which are actually going to offer you protection. The disease which was produced in you and the antibodies which you produce as a result of that disease are not necessarily going to give you all neutralizing antibodies. So to actually have a good enough protection, we need to take up a vaccine. So this is what the platform and the vaccines are, and what is the importance of antibodies. Now I may come up to some of the controversies which are there in the Indian vaccines which are available. So in the first week of January, two Indian companies, Serum Institute, which is basically produced a vaccine which was researched by Oxford and supported by AstraZeneca, put up an application with the subject expert committee and the Drug Control General of India for approval of its vaccine, and so did Bharat Biotech. Now let's take up Covishield. Covishield has got good data, phase 1, phase 2 data which is available. Now what are these phases which basically everybody talks about so loosely, and do they actually make a difference or not? Let's find out. So these phases are the stages at which the vaccine is produced. So there is a preclinical stage or exploratory stage where you actually explore various types of platforms and decide that we're going to narrow down on this platform to produce a viral vaccine. Then there is a preclinical stage. In a preclinical stage, you basically look at animal studies, lab studies, and see whether that vaccine is effectively being produced or not, and whether it is at least safe in the animals or not. Then you have a phase 1 trial, which is actually a human trial. A small number of individuals, somewhere between 50 to 300 individuals are chosen as volunteers. They are healthy volunteers, they are monitored strictly, they have got very strict selection criteria, and those are the ones who are basically given this vaccine. And this phase 1, once completed, you go to a larger population, which is phase 2. And between the phase 1 and phase 2, what you look at is essentially the safety aspect of it. So where there are any allergic reactions, where there are any anaphylactic reactions, where there are any short-term side effects, where there are any long-term side effects over the 2 or 3 months. And these are the effects which are basically seen and then documented. So by the time a vaccine goes through the phase 2 trial, safety is unequivocally established. There is no question about the safety. So you should not be worried about the safety of a vaccine if it has passed through phase 1 and phase 2 trial. A phase 3 trial, which is done on a large number of individuals, of course keeps on monitoring the safety as well, but it more looks now at immunogenicity and efficacy data. So what does efficacy data mean? That if 100 people were to given a vaccine, how many of them would actually produce antibodies which would give them protection? That's the efficacy. Now, why is this question coming up? The question is coming up because not all individuals are equal. Just like we don't have all the fingers of our hand equal, individuals are different, and the response to the same dose of vaccine in different individuals is different. And some of them may have a very, very good response, some of them may have a moderate response, or some of them may have a blunted response. But to top it up all, there would be a small number of individuals who would be completely non-responders, and they would not produce antibodies which would be enough to offer them protection against that particular disease. And that's why this efficacy is looked at. And when you sort of look at the efficacy and you narrow it down, you come up to a percentile. And that's what people say, that this is 70% efficacious, 50% efficacious. Now, I want to give it a different thought. Right now, we've had around a small population of India, of the world, which is affected with COVID. Majority of people are not affected with COVID. Not more than 95% of the people are not affected with COVID. So they don't actually have any protection. So to even have a vaccine which will give them say 50 to 70% protection is still better than not having any protection. And as I've already said, The safety of the vaccine is unquestionably answered in the phase 1 and phase 2. So we should not be bothered about the safety at all. What we should be bothered about is what are the aspects which will essentially give you the protection coming up over the next 1 year or 6 months. Now still some unanswered questions are there. One is how long will this immunity last for? We feel that when 2 doses are given, both these vaccines which have come in India are basically required to give 2 doses. The first dose followed by a second dose at 4 weeks time. And if you give 2 doses, I think you should probably have immunity for 9 months to a year or so. But I think time will tell us even the people who were in the trial have not completed 1 year yet. So only time will tell us how long and how often we'll have to take up these shots. Now why 2 doses and why 4 weeks apart? I'll tell you a story of the Covishield. Now Covishield, the dose which was basically decided in the trial was 0.5 ml for the first dose, followed by a booster dose of 0.5 ml again at 4 weeks interval. By mistake, they gave actually 0.25 ml as the first dose, and then gave 0.5 ml as the second dose at 4 weeks interval. And they found that people who had got 0.25 first and then 0.5 later had almost 90% efficacy, as opposed to 0.5 and 0.5 which had around 70% efficacy. And that's why they basically were admitting that there was a mistake initially of the dosing, and now the dosing has been corrected to 0.5 and 0.5. Now what UK has done, UK is going through a very disastrous situation right now. The new UK strain which is being talked about, which is around 70% more infections than the normal strain, has created several infections in the UK population. Several thousands of infections in the UK population, and thousands of people are dying every day. To have their maximum population vaccinated at least once, what UK did is they increased the interval from between the first dose and the second dose from 4 weeks to 3 months. Now can you do that? Ideally you can do that because the first dose will offer you some amount of immunity and some amount of antibodies for up to 2 to 3 months. But before 3 months you need to get your second dose done so that you can have an immune response. That may give you long lasting immunity, and that would probably also help UK into getting their population quickly vaccinated. I will give you an example. Maharashtra today has got around 12 crore people. If we were to vaccinate all 12 crore people in the next 2-3 months, we would require 24 crore doses. But if I was to basically say that I'm going to give only 1 dose and give the second dose in 3 months time, I only need 12 crore doses right now. Rest of the 12 crore doses can be used for some other state. And then Maharashtra will again have its 12 crore quota in the next 3 months time when the second dose is given. So you can actually spread out and cover larger population by increasing the dose. But that's not what has been proposed right now. The proposed and the agreed accepted criteria is 4 weeks interval between the 2 doses. Now why is there so much of talk about Covaxin? Why is there so much of controversy about Covaxin? The problem with Covaxin as opposed to Covishield is that Covishield phase 1, phase 2 and some phase 3 data is available. It has already got an approval in UK, so there seems to be a higher confidence about Covishield. But Covaxin only phase 1 and phase 2 data, that too not in complete public domain, was available. Just last week after the approval, Lancet published 350 patient phase 1 data which actually showed and completely endorsed the safety aspect of it. But remember, when the subject expert committee is looking at data, they are looking at data which is public domain and not in public domain. And then when the Drug Control General of India actually looks at the subject matter committee expert, they look at all the recommendations plus review the data on their own and only then give an authorization. So I think we should have faith in our authorization process. We should have faith in our subject matter experts and the DCGI, and rest assured that safety is not being compromised. I will give you another mathematics of the safety, which would actually tell you and open up your eyes as to what I am trying to tell you. The first and the most important aspect. Let us assume, for the sake of discussion, let us assume that vaccine may produce a life-threatening complication or could be life-threatening in some of the individuals. The chances of that happening are in the tune of 1 in 1 lakh. Okay, 1 in 1 lakh. If you vaccinate 1 lakh people, one person may have a life-threatening complication or may actually end up losing life. Okay, this is just for the sake of discussion. This is not documented anywhere. But let's say 100 people have COVID-19. well documented papers published 2% mortality. That means if 100 people have COVID, 2 people are going to lose their life. As opposed to 1 lakh people getting vaccinated, 100,000 people getting vaccinated, one may have a complication. This may is not documented, never ever published, no data available. These are all speculative data. So even on the sake of discussion, if you assume it to be true, it still does not match the mathematics that when you actually have COVID, chances of dying are 2%, and when you have vaccine, there is absolutely no chance of dying or having a life-threatening reaction, because it has never been documented. So my friends, don't worry about the vaccine safety. Please go ahead and take the vaccine. I think a lot of people have already taken vaccine. India, in the first 6 days of vaccination, vaccinated almost 1 million of its population. I think the current data says that around 2.8 billion people, 28 lakh people have been vaccinated across the country. And barring a couple of incidences, you would not see or hear anything adverse in the paper. Most of these people who are vaccinated are frontline medical workers, whether they're doctors, nurses, ward boys, or they are from the admin staff, or they are physiotherapists or dietitians, or people who are actually coming in contact like radiologists, radiographers, X-ray technicians. All of these people are the ones who are actually getting vaccinated right now. And all of them have put their chin up and decided to get vaccinated for the simple fact that having vaccine is much more safer than actually having COVID. So please dispel all the myths which you would have in your mind about vaccine and vaccine safety. Do not listen to any rumor mongering. Now let us answer some of your simple and commonly asked questions. So you have comorbidities, diabetes, blood pressure, hypertension, which is another way of describing blood pressure, kidney disease, or you may have had an operation like a bypass or a stent being put in. Should we take a vaccine? Now my friends, this vaccine is actually meant for people who are at high risk. That means healthcare workers who are in the front line. And the second stage, if you remember, the government of India in the Niti Ayog's planning, the 3 crore workers which are going to be there are the frontline workers, and then the second level of frontline workers like police, paramilitary forces, municipal workers and all those things. And then the 27 crore people are the people who are above 50 and with comorbidities. The vaccine is actually meant for people with comorbidities. So